Hi everyone, Adrian Player here. In this video, we're going to be talking about commercial solar systems. Now, bear in mind, I am not in the sales field for commercial solar. I'm not a commercial solar business. I'm a commercial investor that is looking to put solar on top of their particular commercial property. So, what I've essentially done is I've gone through to the property manager because we've got a strata pack of 20 large big box retail with a lot of roof space, right? And then I've gone through to the property manager, and my initial inquiry was, first off, who are the owners of the pack, because I just got my 12-month notice, so I could see out of the 20 who owned the most and who owned the least, because with strata a lot of the time it's by committee and you need to have more than 50% approval to be going down the solar route, and if some say no and they've got separate power meters and things, potentially you don't have to put solar on their roofs, right? Or you could have one bulk agreement for the whole strata pack, and then because the size of the system that they're putting on, you end up getting a better deal. But when I'm looking at it, and because I've got 2 out of the 20, I particularly want just 2 separated systems set up individually for each one of my roofs that I operate and maintain. That's the direction that I want to be going in. Now, when I looked at the strata pack, I could see that there was one particular owner that had about 40% of the total. So immediately I asked the property manager, what are their thoughts on solar? You know, what type of investor are they? And they're a pretty big investor, an investor that likes a return and doesn't like too much sit and forget. So that's a really good thing as far as I'm concerned. So as long as that person is happy and there's more than 50% approval on the strata, then it looks like we should be able to get solar on it pretty easily. Now, my wife, Maria, this was going back 6, 7, 8 years ago. She worked in residential solar in a company. Now, we're aware, very aware of the solar industry, and there are a lot of dodgy operators in the space, and a lot of companies go bankrupt. A lot of companies do a lot of dodgy things like using unaccredited contractors, or when they send out for bids, they go for the cheapest, or, they're constantly setting up companies and then busting companies every kind of 1, 2, or 3 years, all right, and then they've got a lot of claims against them. Or what happens is the warranties, when the company goes bust, a lot of the providers won't fulfill the warranties because the companies are no longer there. All right, so these are a lot of the problems that we see with solar, and the same thing happens in the commercial solar space, right? Now, let's talk about this a little bit openly. So there's a couple of different types of agreements that you can have with solar. So one would be me outlaying somewhere in the realm of $50,000 to $100,000 for my own system. Now, some people, if they've got excess money, they might do that because with commercial solar, especially in the size of the systems, the payback is a lot quicker. I've seen some payback schedules in the realm of 30 to 40% a year. So really, you're getting to year, say, 2.5, and you're coming close to getting fully paid back, year 2 to year 3. All right, so we've seen a little bit of that. So if you've got a decent amount, and then what happens is you get a benefit because you've got that, then the tenant gets a benefit because they get a locked in lower rate on their power as well. And then also, you've got to go looking at the type of your tenants, right? Well, with me, I've got a pet barn and I've got a super cheap auto. Now, as far as the pet barn goes, they've got a whole lot of air cons on their roof, and they're running them because they've got animals and fish and a lot of things in the pet barn. So from pretty much sun up to sundown, they're running full aircon. So the property manager already knew that they were very fully supportive, because they're gone down the route of solar. I think it was with a prior ownership, but then it got to a point where they just went to a couple of large solar companies and a couple of the big electric companies, but then it really fizzled out after that. They didn't really continue. All right, so one, you've got to look at your tenant types. You've got to see how much power that they're using, because it has to be a win-win-win scenario. Like the commercial investor has a win, the tenant has a win, as well as everything else. So that's if you want to put a cost in on it, right? And you've got the money, and then you make a larger return on that. Now, most of these solar systems are going to be anywhere around, they say 25 to 30 years, right? But every year, it's like a slow downhill with their efficiency ratings. And a lot of the efficiency ratings fall off a cliff after about 15 years. And a lot of the warranties are a little bit harder to manage after 10 to 15 years, depending on the inverter and the solar panels that you're using, right? And a lot of people don't know that it doesn't really matter what types of panels you're getting. They're all coming out of the same factory a lot of the time over in China. So, yeah, there are better panels than others. There are better inverters than others. Some people like to go very minimal on the inverters, and then they'll stick the largest amount of panels against the inverters that they've got and really just try and maximize it. But then what really happens over time is they're overloading the inverter. So a lot of the time I like getting a little bit more inverter space so then the inverters aren't overloaded. So it costs a little bit more to do it that way, and you're not utilizing every square inch of the space that the inverter has to put the amount of maximum solar panels on each inverter, but you don't want each inverter going under stress, right? So, and these are the things that a lot of the solar companies are going to talk to you about. All right, so that's the first kind of scenario. So you're going to be in a scenario where you've got a capital input cost, you're getting your money back by most likely year 3 sometime, and then it's all mullah after that, right? So some of these larger systems, I mean, you could be getting 20 to 30 grand net a year positive on top of a system that's cost you somewhere like 70 to 90 grand, right? So after year 3, that's all pure cash on top of it. Then it comes down to your roof. Who has to maintain it? If there are problems, what do the warranties say? What happens if something happens to the roof? So you've really got to check in the agreements, these kind of things. And then you've got the other way of doing things, which a lot of people do. They don't want a lot of the capital cost with putting it on the roof, and they want more of a secondary thing. Well, what they do is they go to some of these larger suppliers. They set up a kind of a lease arrangement where everyone signs up to an electric agreement. And then some of these companies, you know, they've got 10,000 commercial premise with commercial solar and a solar agreement on top, and then I'm more of a passive investor. So in that kind of situation, you might have we'll give you a 1.3, or normally it's in the range of like 1 to 1.5% net yield, depending on the size of the panel system on the roof. All right, so that's the other kind of agreement where you're giving them a lease, they're giving you the tenant lower electric costs, right? So they're benefiting, and then you're getting a lease. So it acts like I've got my pet barn, I've got my super cheap auto, and then I've got the lease on the roof of the solar, and any of the upside in the solar they take, which is completely fine if you've got an insurance agreement, they maintain the solar and they maintain the roof. If there's any damage, a lot of people like going down that route as well. So look, this is just me going through these kind of steps initially, I'm getting quotes right now for my roof. So if I look at it like realistically as an investor's point of view, what I'll be doing is I'll be getting a 6% net yield, and then I've got 5 and 7 year leases with 3% rental increases, right? So I've got that. So after a 5 to 7 year agreement for the leases, I'll be sitting on a net yield of over kind of 8%, maybe 8.5%. All right, in the early eights. Then I've got 40 grand worth of outgoings that I know is currently as a portion of the lease that I can kick onto the tenant. So that boosts me up a little bit more. So that might bring me to a closer to a 9% net yield. And then if I go ahead and I do this, then I'm in a situation where I'm adding about 1 to 1.5% percentage points on my net yield on my property. So that'll boost me up over 10, maybe 10.5% net yield. All right, that doesn't seem like a lot, right? But if you're working off, like I bought it on a cap rate of a 6, let's say I want to sell it in 10 years on a cap rate of a 5.5, as long as it's a good, strong market and people want this type of asset. And then I'm sitting on a rental yield on my cost basis of 10.5%. So let's say it goes upwards to 380 to 400 grand, something like that, by that time. And then you go ahead and you look at, well, what is 400 grand at a 5.5% cap rate? So I'll bring out my calculator and I'll have a look at that. All right, and then we go ahead and look. So let's do 380, put it in a calculator, divided by 5.5%. It's a 6.9 mil valuation. All right, so I bought it for 3.775 and 6.9 mil. That could potentially be what the value is at the end of the 5 to 7 year leases if I roll onto a new lease and the tenant stays. All right, so that's close to a 3 mil uplift if I go down this kind of route. And really, all I've really done is I've had a good, solid investment with really great tenants. I've had 3% rental increases the whole time. I knew going into it, I've got 40 grand worth of outgoings that I can kick back onto the tenant on the new lease. The property manager has already told me that that's the case. I probably can't seek a huge increase in the rent because I'm in a regional market. That's more of city stuff that gets done where huge increases happen. And then I've just put solar on the roof, and then over a 5 to 7 year period, I've made a 3 year return. A 3 mil return. All right, so that's just one example of this, right? It's not all upside. So what if the roof of what you've got is not structurally set up for the weight of solar? So there's that. Okay, and also with solar, what if something goes wrong? All right, who's got the warranties? How long has the solar company been in place? Is there insurance policies in place? Does the strata cover it because it's on the top of the roof? Also, some people don't like commercial with an outdated solar system on the roof. So I think once you get up to about year 8, 10 or 12, you've got to make a choice. Do you want to maintain that long term? All right. Or do you want to continue with what you've got, knowing that maybe at the 15-year mark, you might have to tear it all out and then replace it with another system, right? And then at that time, you might have to upgrade the roof, all right? So these are all the things that you need to be considering with solar, and these are the things I'm considering as a commercial property investor. So look, these are the things that we're going through. These are the very simple things that you can do to increase your yield on cost. You've got to be making sure that you're dealing with a long-term reputable solar company that hasn't gone boom and bust 10 times in 5 years, right? And then you've still got a little bit of ongoing maintenance and things. And then what the solar panels will give you efficiency rating in year 1 is not what you're going to be getting in year 10, 11 and 12. But the key thing is solar is a lot better now than it was 15 years ago with the panels, with how long they like the different films that they use, the different materials. So it's a lot better now than it was in the past. All right, and it's only getting better. So these are the things that we need to be talking about. If you've got any questions or you need some help, here and my team, we're here. We're commercial and investor mortgage brokers. We deal with all the complex clients. So send me an email. More than happy to help. All right then, bye.